Welcome to the Nerve to Lead podcast. Here we explore power, pleasure, leadership, identity, belonging, parenting, and couplehood, and explore stories of navigating through life, finding both authenticity and attachment through the common lens of the nervous system. I am your host, Sangeeta Parthasarathy, and I'm so glad you're here. Hello and welcome to another episode of Nerve to Lead. I'm super honored to have Kate White with me today. Kate and I have known each other for quite a while. Kate runs Pre and Perinatal Institute. Kate has extensive work in utero and early attachment and birth, and the impact of birth. She is someone I regard very highly. She's been a mentor. She's been my therapist. She's been a friend. Welcome, Kate. I'm so honored to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's exciting to talk with you, Sangeeta. So thanks for inviting me.
So, Kate, let me start with this question. How does our in utero and birth experiences shape us as adults?
Well, that's a really big question. And I have short answers and I have long answers. Maybe I should have the just right answer. I don't know it. But we know that our earliest experiences in life will lay down a foundation or a template. And there are actually ways we can look at that template through layers or through a lens of trying to decide, okay, where in our sequence of development do we, when we have issues that arise, when do they develop? And what the research has borne out to show us is that a lot of times the things that start in utero don't show up until we are adults, until we are in our 20s or our teens. We also know that how we are parented, so there's an attachment sequence that develops, and that's even preconception. Some of the things that we see in our lives are not even ours. They start in our previous sort of generations. So we're looking at the way we develop in a sequence, in layers of experience, and how they gather and often are stacked on top of each other, and then they're compressed. So the way we are conceived, like if we're a wanted baby, the things that happen prenatally, if our parent is overly stressed or has a loss of their parent or other important loved one while we're in utero, or some of the dynamics of our placenta and other things, and how our embryo, how we make our body. I mean, those show up as adults, but also as children. And then how we are born, the chemicals used, the compression, the length of birth, how we are in our body, if we have intrauterine constraint, can develop, influence how we grow. And sometimes, people are not trained to see this, at least not yet. We're getting there. And so as adults, we can have like a mental health that doesn't express until we're in our early 20s. That's related to how we are born. We can have a variety of depressive or anxiety or mood disorders that are connected to our health, that started in relationship within our family dynamic or a cultural dynamic. And we can have things that haunt us from preconception, from our ancestors. So it's really about pattern recognition. We've learned to be able to see patterns and understand that they have pre and perinatal roots. And we do now have practices and professional education that can help ameliorate or even extinguish some of the trauma patterns that come from our earliest lives. So that's a very broad stroke. I don't know if that gives you a good enough answer, Sangeeta. So you let me know.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's fascinating. And of course, like as practitioners, you're at a party and somebody walks in, you look at their head and you're like, oh, caput. And oh, I know what happened at your birth,
Right.
Once you start seeing those patterns and they show up, like you said, when you know what to look for, it's pretty you can tell. So I want to ask you, what is attachment from a pre-verbal perspective? So this is not widely known. I think when we say attachment, we think it's emotions, we think it's communication, we think it's love in a very narrative adult sense. But can you tell us a little bit about what attachment is from that in utero pre-verbal before 18 months perspective?
Well, yes. Well, attachment, I mean, in the literature, you read it as attachment styles, right? You read it as how we're parented or how we parent based on the work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth and Mary Main. And we know that these styles are biological. They're not necessarily just an idea. They are hardwired into our body. So there's attachment, which is how parents are in relationship with their children. Bonding, I think, is from the parent side. Attachment is from the child side. And when we talk about bonding prenatally, it's really encouraging the parent to see their developing baby as someone who's having experiences and wanting to connect, because we're hardwired to connect. And we know that prenatal bonding has really good outcomes. It can decrease the difficulty of births and increase the level of settling or nervous system regulation for the baby and for the baby and parent. It can also translate into other things like how our IQ is developed and some of our linguistics and other things that start with how we make our body. And our neurons start firing in utero. Our neurons get laid down at a very high rate in utero. We have as many neurons in our body as stars in the galaxy, according to Thomas Burney. And so those neurons are collecting information. It's somatic information. It's biological. And so the relationships that we develop with our babies, that can translate into lifelong health, starting prenatally. And so we encourage parents to understand their dynamic, their attachment style. And we can test for that now. We do have these sensitive psychological instruments and help them, really confront and become more aware of their own patterns. It's about, like I said, pattern recognition, trying not to give it any kind of a flavor of bad or good. We do know that there's more desirable patterns, and we can encourage humans of every age towards recognition of the health and understanding when patterns are not in service to us and when they can be. Just bringing more consciousness and more choice to how we parent and how we live.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Just building off of what you said, a lot of times when we work with mothers, especially mothers postnatally, and it doesn't matter what age the child is, but when we're working with them for nervous system regulation and somatic work, a lot of times it brings up a shame around stress during pregnancy and perhaps not bonding enough. And I know that patriarchy sets women up for unrealistic standards and women to be superwomen and all of that, and therefore there is a lot of was I a good enough mother that goes on. So would you like to share something with either pregnant women or mothers postnatally about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, this is a passionate discussion I can have. And I do actually have it all the time.
Yes.
Mostly it's my husband who's walking with me with my dog, who's listening to me, or not maybe. But I feel like in our culture, I mean, I'm in the United States, you're in India. I mean, we just don't support families very well at this stage of life. And I don't know what we were thinking, like maybe we weren't. But how to create really good care for families after they have babies. And what you're describing is a stressed out person, a mother. Usually it is the woman who's got to now shift her life totally once she becomes a parent of a baby. Becoming a parent of an older child is a little different, but once you are with a newborn, I mean, your life is very much dedicated to nurturing that newborn, and it's sleeping and feeding, and it's hard work. And
Yes.
then her support, where is her support network? If it's her other parent, the husband or the other partner, and they have to go back to work, and maybe she has to go back to work.
Yeah.
Maybe she has to work 2 jobs in order to make enough money. And what happens to that baby then? And
Right.
the parent gets in the squeeze of this. How do I make life happen for my family? And they sacrifice whatever it is, time, sleep, energy. And they burn the candle at both ends, so to speak.
Yes.
And I mean, some of the studies I've read is like, if you even just give a new parent money, it translates into lifelong health for that family, that child. And so I think honestly that the problem is cultural and societal. In our country, I know it is. It's like, how can we create maternity care and maternal and paternal leave, things like that, which our country should be, because our country has so much money, quote unquote. And I know that there are leadership people who are working on this on the Hill. I think both of our political parties that are so much at war of polemics these days, everybody agrees maternal health is important. So for the pregnant person who on the everyday, or the mother who's out there listening, I would say take heart, because if you feel like you did something wrong or it's on you, that's where I would intervene and just say that's a stress response or a trauma response. And let's talk about it, because I know that for having babies, you need support. And if you do not have enough support, that's where things start to break down. So it can be another pair of arms to hold your baby while you make soup or take a shower or even have a nap. Or if you have birth trauma and you're not able to rest or sleep, then this needs to be taken care of and seen.
Yeah,
and if the baby has birth
absolutely.
trauma and is crying or sleeping and feeding is challenging,
Oh, yes.
we need practitioners that know how to work with that. And that's what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
I'm training practitioners, and I'm really interested in scaling up what I do so that there are more baby body workers out there who can see what's happening for a baby and for a parent. And often I can make a difference in a family with one visit. So,
oh, yes.
Yeah. So I think that we just are at the beginning. Unfortunately, it's interesting how it is now in 2023, the beginning of really integrating what kind of professionals do we need to help mitigate challenges during this time. I think it's just connecting the dots, actually.
Yeah.
The professionals
So
are out
critical.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is so critical. Just making sense of it from the baby's perspective, but also from the mother's perspective about the birth. And if there was trauma involved, for example, exactly like you're saying. And then also, I think there are studies that say that you only need about 30% of attuned secure attachment behaviors for the brain and body to rewire for secure attachment. Therefore, and this is something I tell all my clients, is that you've not messed it up. It's not that it's a done thing. And babies' nervous systems are even more flexible and so. What would you call it? Forgiving? What's the word for it? Forgiving?
Well,
Yes.
babies are very loving and forgiving.
Forgiving.
Yeah, and you can make repair with a baby, but your baby's sitting there thinking, I did something wrong, just like you are. I don't know if they have those words, but there is a felt sense of, I'm bad, or this was intended, this painful thing. Therefore, I must be bad if I've had this experience. And so, I mean, I can be with parents and just say to both, no, you did nothing wrong. This just happened. And that's the way it is. It's a lot of very impersonal, painful things happen at births and prenatally, and both parents and baby take it very personally. So you can get in there as a professional and say, no, these things just happened. It's nothing you did wrong. And suddenly there's a lot of relief in the space.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to really explain and repeat myself. And the more I do, the more relief and the more, oh my God, I'm not a bad parent. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You mean that just happened, and not because I was bad or something I did wrong? No, it just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now, a small break to talk about more resources. We have created an autonomic safety assessment for parents, which helps baseline our co-regulation capacity, which is available for free to download and use. It is available as a link on the episode show notes. Now back to our conversation. Could you share some client approved stories with us of how repairing our earliest in utero or birth trauma, even as adults, can somatically create massive shifts for us as adults, like maybe working with that?
All right, so I can talk about some themes. Like, let me talk about themes first, and then I can also talk about myself.
Yes.
Because I've done all the work,
Yes.
in order to just sit here in front of you.
Yes.
I've been doing this 25 years now. I want to talk about some major themes of pre-perinatal work. We got here because of our work with adults. It didn't start with recognizing the baby's experience. It started with adults that had regressive memories. And so for them, I mean, claustrophobia was one of the themes that awoke us to the baby's experience. You came into my life when I was working at APA, the Association for Pre and Perinatal Psychology and Health, that was co-founded by David Chamberlain and Thomas Verney. And David Chamberlain was a hypnotherapist and a psychologist and a minister. And it was through his clients that had extreme claustrophobia that when they were hypnotized, went back to the womb. This was often a third trimester imprint, and where there isn't enough room and there's no way out, not at least not at that time. So this is one of the examples I can give you from the adult perspective. Sure. Another really painful pattern, which I see quite often, is a feeling of belonging.
Yes.
Yeah, we know that there are 9, I call them the 9 positive imprints that are related to our earliest beginnings. And that's, am I safe? Am I protected? Am I seen, felt, and heard, therefore understood? And am I lovable? And do I belong? And so there's a way that trying to track what people are feeling. The 2 others that are in that list are, am I wanted and am I welcome? And for those of us who are conceived and we're not wanted, that's an imprint.
Yes.
And many people who, like half of us, are conceived with consciousness. The other half is like conception happens and it's a little bit mistimed, like, oh, I wanted a baby, I guess it's going to have to be now. And then there is a percentage of us that are really conceived and not wanted. And that is difficult, to be making your life and your brain and your body and your nervous system in an environment like your parent, like your mother, where you're not wanted. And the
wrong gender.
Yes, or the wrong gender. Exactly, which is very common, I think, in India. And
yeah,
if you are a woman, you made yourself in a parent who's thinking, I hope I have a boy.
Yep.
That's very painful. And then you begin to dislike yourself, and wherever you go, you're in this imprint of,
yes,
I'm not wanted. And so the people with that imprint, they'll walk in a room and their radar is extremely sensitive. So if there's somebody across the room who maybe has a mood because their day is bad for them or they're stressed, we perceive it as somebody rejecting us. And there's also people who are given up, for relinquished for adoption. And And this is very confusing for the little one. And then as the adult, I mean, you can have a wide range of responses. And some of those people have big challenges with creating family and feeling home and feeling at home, or that they're accepted. I mean, I hope you can get a sense of, those of you out there listening, like these places lie in us in a very implicit way. And they can be,
Yes.
and like I have a talk that I give called "The Baby is in the Shadow." And our baby parts are still here. They're alive. They're listening. And babies are super sentient, super perceptive. And for those of us who have trauma in the early parts of our lives, that baby part can stay quite alive and quite intense, and always be perceiving through that lens of this thing that happened to us.
So I'm just the implicit, meaning that there is no narrative, linear story associated with it, but implicit memory means it is stored as bodily processes, patterns, and don't necessarily have a corresponding story, a narrative story behind it. And therefore, a big part of how we come into the world, etc., is pre-verbal. That is, if somebody asks you what happened in the first 18 months of your life, we don't know, because the part called hippocampus that comes online, it develops. It's the part that files away each memory as narrative. The storage doesn't really come online. That doesn't mean we don't remember it. It's just that the body remembers it, not
That's right.
with words.
Right. The body remembers it, and the body shows it through posture, through gesture, through sensation. And like one of my favorite quotes from the Somatic experiencing teacher, Peter Levine, he talks about how the implicit memories will rise, and they're hot. They rise quickly. They're like a collage of sensation, and it's layered quickly upon itself. And the way that we make sense of it is like, well, there must be something in the present that is informing that. And we make a story up about it. But the truth of it is, it might just really be an implicit layer. Like I said, maybe you did nothing wrong. You were just there. So a lot of times when I'm working with adults, I mean, I have to help them identify their layers of experience, and then really get the sense that they are there. Who they really are is underneath these layers. And we work to integrate the layers. I use a somatic approach, which is working with sensation and helping them realize their health. Often we have adaptation sequences, like if we're not wanted and we have a natural fight or flight, maybe we'll fight or we'll flee, or we'll have our natural normal responses to the challenges that we've had. And helping adults get it. Oh, this was what I did to survive. And we appreciate that. And then use consciousness, like, can I choose a different way? Like, well, how do I want to be? So this is what I work with adults. Like, well, how do you want things to be? What is it that you're curious about? How can we employ our consciousness to choose different things for ourselves and have a different life, if that's what we're wanting?
Absolutely. Tell us about leadership. I think in this field and in general, the role of power and attachment, and also leaders in the field of somatic work. You've really created your own body of work, which is amazing. Just tell us about leadership and how we show up in the world.
Well, first of all, let me take the last sentence that you said. How do we show up in the world? Like, I can say that one of the layers, like those 9 positive imprints I talked about, is feeling seen. How is it for you to feel seen? And that layer can start preconception. For example, in my history, my family really prized boys. So women were always sort of considered second choice, not best. And my grandfather, my mother's father, he wanted boys, but he had 4 girls. So no boys. And that, believe me, that all those girls suffered that. And then I was born. Of course, I'm not a boy. And so I mean, you can feel the layer, the heaviness of it. Like, how is it, can we grow in culture and family? I mean, now already those are layers, right? In our culture, where if we're white and male, we excel, certainly if you have money. So
Yes.
I mean, we're already, things are stacked. You can start to feel the stack, right? And
Yes.
so in leadership, and in my field of practice is so small still. I mean, there aren't a lot of strong leadership development programs. In my field of practice in the United States, there was really only 2 teachers. And so really developing leadership tracks, developing provider tracks and practitioner tracks. I mean, these are things that we're still a young profession. So there's a lot of room for leadership development for sure. I don't know if that's a good answer for your question, but I feel like it's a combination of, like, I liked what you said before we got on the air. How can we develop a nervous system that's capable of power, of wielding power and feeling our worth? It's about worth as well. Like, can we value ourselves and have endurance? And then it's relational. And women tend to then befriend as opposed to fight and flee. It depends on the lead, right? But I mean, you need to have a person who's got a nervous system whose natural tendencies are much more in alignment with what does it take in our country to be a leader. You have to have a certain capacity and resilience and
absolutely.
Fortitude.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And that's the big part of my work is power and helping reckon with power and how we hold it in our bodies, and power as an early attachment imprint, but also ability to hold enoughness of power as a nervous system function. Therefore, where we don't get into those perpetrator, savior, victim kind of roles, and a lot of power ambivalence around, okay, I got here, now I have power. But historically, power meant aggression. Therefore, this is scary for me to hold,
Well, I know that the way I've been trained, that power and peace go together. But power, in order to get to the goodness of your power, you often have to come into connection with annihilation, because those power, I find, is the quality human essence that underneath annihilative layers. And that's a scary layer. There's a lot of terror, and you have to have capacity to be and move through that terror. And so therefore you need a practitioner who has moved through the terror to pull you through. And just believing, and often the way I work with it in adults is I can hear it in what they're sharing. Because somebody will come and say, I really want peace, more peace in my life. Often the reason why they want the peace is because of some terror or aggression that's been against them, or that they've been in it for a long time and they're tired. So I'm listening to their sharing. And that's one of the other things I would say about working with adults, is that they can voice. They do have language. They can tell you, only sometimes you have to listen through the lens of the baby's experience, because the stories they tell you, you're listening for what are those layers, and you can hear it in the words they choose and how they're telling you. And that's the job of the practitioner. And that's what I need people to do. So I think there is a way that we can find leadership, but we have to do it with a benign, sovereign approach, but it doesn't mean I'm not powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so very much. How can people find you? Tell us a bit more about what you have in the pipeline, like upcoming courses, offering.
Well, I have a website. It's called ppncenter.com. It's a center for pre and perinatal programs. And right now I'm in the midst of shifting things over to creating an institute where people can come and get a variety of education, from the academic to the bodywork aspect, and mostly it's a somatic skills. And I have an online school. You can find that, Perinatal Healing Online, through the current ppncenter.com. And that's the best way for your listeners to find me.
Thank you so very much, Kate. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Well, to be continued, Sangeeta. So we'll see you.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you for joining me today on Nerve to Lead podcast. The music you hear in this podcast was created by Soundcreed. You can find their link in the description. Thank you to Vaishnavi in Team Sangpar for producing and editing this podcast. Did this episode resonate with you? If it did, please share it with your friends, family, co-workers, or clients. We would also love to hear from you. Drop us a note on www.sangpar.com.